Two things that you figure would never, ever, ever go together would be Quentin Tarantino and Star Trek. Yet here we are looking at this headline from Cinema Blend saying Quentin Tarantino confirms his potential Star Trek movie will be rated R. And we've been talking about this film, this potential movie, this rumored project from Quentin Tarantino and Paramount for quite some time. Why is it that Tarantino wants to work on the Star Trek film? And why is it that he wants to make it rated R? I mean, of course, as Quentin Tarantino, anything less than rated R would be considered sacrilege by a number of film goers out there, myself included. But here's what the article says. Is it even a Quentin Tarantino movie without his stylized high violence and sharp language sprinkled throughout his dialogue? Each one of the director's films has certainly earned their R ratings, but what happens to his reputation if Tarantino ends up directing his pitch Star Trek movie? Well, he says, oh yeah, it's an R-rated movie. If I do it, it will be R-rated. And that's the whole thing. If he does it, it will be R-rated up until the point Paramount gets absolutely cold feet, realizes that they're not going to make any money on an R-rated Trek film, even with Tarantino's name attached to it. And they're ultimately going to, neuter it down to PG-13 and cut out all the time Sulu drops the N-bomb. That's how I view it. I don't think Paramount has the cojones to actually do an R-rated Trek film. But anyway, it goes on to say here, if the Pulp Fiction director is involved, it's obviously going to include his famed aesthetic. This would be the first for Star Trek franchise, which has stayed PG-13 in recent years. Previously, when William Shatner and the original series donned the big screen in the 80s, the films were PG. Amidst some roadblocks during Paramount's development of Star Trek IV that ultimately led to it being shelved, Tarantino pitched his own take on the property. It was reported that Revenant writer Mark L. Smith was on board to write the script. In Tarantino's recent interview with Empire, he says this: "There's a script that exists for now. I need to weigh in on it, but I haven't been able to do that just yet." Now, obviously, this is because he's finishing up Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which opens in a few weeks. It's going to be fantastic. But he's not writing the script. Mark L. Smith is writing the script, which is one of the reasons why I have a bit of trepidation. I'm not fully on board with this being a Tarantino thing. And I'll tell you guys why. Tarantino writes his own screenplays, right? Tarantino is known for that, with the exception of like Pulp Fiction, which he did have a co-writer on who got I think no love at the end of the day. But ultimately, Tarantino writes his own stuff. So coming in and having another writer on board to handle this is a little bit weird for me. But we did hear about a writer's room being developed for this movie last year. So there was some interest from Paramount to make this thing a reality. Now, it goes on to say here that Mark L. Smith has been working hard on the script for a Tarantino Star Trek movie. The director just needs to look it over, and he's busy working on the movie on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And when that's over, he'll focus his shift back over to Star Trek. So with Tarantino going back over to Star Trek after Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I mean, that shows you that there's interest. And it's possible that Paramount is just at the peak effort mode. They don't care anymore. It could possibly be that they don't care. They could look at the fact that the Star Trek film franchise needs a shot in the arm, similar to Star Trek Discovery being that shot in the arm, so to speak. And I say that not from the sense of being good, because there are people out there who do enjoy Star Trek Discovery, and there are people out there with YouTube channels with large audiences who outright hate Star Trek Discovery, but yet can't stop watching it or discussing it week after week. So you have that. And that dynamic and that craziness and the fact that that show has gone into R-rated territory with F-bombs shows you that there is an audience for it. We just haven't seen it theatrically. So if Tarantino comes on board and he brings his famed aesthetic for dialogue choices and quips and colorful uses of very racially charged language and everything else, as well as pop culture references, it's going to be very interesting to see where this whole thing goes. And as far as it being perhaps a lower budgeted experiment that Paramount puts out there in hopes of just trying to reignite a fan base over this film, where it could be either good or bad. And I know no studio ever seeks out to lose money, but they could be backing this film as an absolute play to treat it more like, let's say, the movie The Producers, right? Where they put this terrible concept out there, one that nobody's going to go and see. And at the end of the day, there's an ulterior motive. The ulterior motive would be to get the finances to make Star Trek the way it was again, right? Or to make it in a way that they want to make it while putting out something so terrible that nobody ever wants to go that far away from the core canon or core aesthetic ever again, which is an entire point, which is a theory. It's a very wasteful theory, but a theory nonetheless. That could be the case here. Now, I don't believe that's the case, and I say that simply because it just doesn't make any sense. At the end of the day, these studios have a budget. They've got employees. They've got to make it work, and their goal is to make money. But at the same time, a Tarantino-led Star Trek film or a Tarantino-produced Star Trek film is one that would get a lot of people interested, get a lot of people talking about it, and it would pique that interest. And with that piqued interest and that constant commentary, that would lead to butts and seats, if anything, out of pure curiosity. And if the movie was good, if the movie was really good, those butts would come back with their friends. Maybe that's the play. It's not necessarily a producer's play where they're trying to lose money in order to make more money down the road or to go back to what they want. But they're doing this Hail Mary in order to bring in a very controversial filmmaker who's been around for well over 20 years, whose films are beloved by millions, and bring him into this property that desperately, desperately needs some kind of new direction. And look, you might be saying, but Matt, come on, Star Trek doesn't need that. Star Trek is perfect the way it is. Everything must evolve to survive. And I'll give you an example. Thor and the Thor: The Dark World. Thor, very much a Shakespearean drama. Kenneth Branagh brought it with a lot of Dutch angles, introduced us to the character, but he was still kind of bland a little bit, right? He was. Chris Hemsworth was kind of bland in the performance. Got better over time, but Thor: The Dark World was just, again, paint-by-number sequel. Nothing really. That movie is rated as low as it is for good reason. Then, of course, a couple years down the road, we ended up getting Thor Ragnarok, which completely reinvented the character and decided to lean into something wholly different. In this case, lots of bright neon lights and color, or in comedy. And he brought in a lot of comedy, and people went apeshit over it, so much so that Thor in Infinity War and Endgame were impacted as a result. And as a result, the character was therefore elevated up. And now we're hearing talks of Thor 4 after a while. Taika Waititi and Chris Hemsworth have pitched a concept to Marvel over it, all because they took a shot in the dark and decided to try something different. Star Trek absolutely needs the same thing theatrically. And if you're one of those stringent TOS fanboys, I get where you're coming from, and you don't want that. Change is scary. I get it. It is. It's scary. I get it. But these movies are not reaching the audience. And that's where the money is. So if you want to see more Star Trek, things have got to change. Maybe not as crazy as Discovery, but they got to change. And so by going down the Tarantino route, they might actually find themselves in a position to reinvigorate the franchise enough to keep it going. If not, it's going to be sat on. So do you want more Trek or less Trek? That's my question to you. Your thoughts, your opinions, your feelings on the matter. That's what I want. If you got a strong emotion over this, I want to see it in the comment section. Be sure to thumbs up the video if you liked my commentary. Be sure to subscribe if you liked my commentary. If you really liked my commentary, check out patreon.com/Matt Jarbo. That really does help out right now, as YouTube is slowly sucking the life out of everyone who works on this platform. And I'll talk to you guys later. Have yourself a fantastic day, and peace out.